Okay, so we've grouped your kids and saw some commonalities and themes. You've got some questions that you need to do some further digging on. Now the final phase of this is how do we implement our plan? We know what we need to do. So talk to us about, in your context, like how do you address literacy needs and how do you see yourself addressing this particular group of kids, right? So start like kind of holistically, big picture, and then work your way down.
All right. So overall, the school IHS has given me and another teacher, Miss Jepson, time to develop universal lessons that all teachers can use and they can tailor to their specific content. And we use this in our dedicated reading block, so our GL, guided learning, flex block in other schools. So during the first 20 minutes of reading once a week, teachers in our school will roll out one of these lessons that focus on the reading framework, starting with background knowledge. It's a good place to start, and then every skill after that will build upon each other, and then for the overall hope that these activities and these skills will be inserted into regular lessons for all the teachers across the school.
Like how long do you spend on each one of those skills? Like how long would you spend on background knowledge before you switch to vocabulary?
Then we're going to do, for each week that we roll out one of these activities, then it would be just once a week, so the teacher can be exposed to this and they can make it tailored to their classroom, and then we can get through all of the activities for the end of the year.
Perfect. Okay, so do you guys have other structures in place to provide specific support around literacy for your students?
Yes, so I've been given time, I've been given a block, a 60-minute block, where I can work with small groups or an individual student. Right now it's an individual student every second day, all year long, that I can specifically target an area that we've categorized for a group of students or skills for a single student.
So right now you're committed to this one student, and it's every second day for 60 minutes that you have that student.
Correct.
So we know that we have a group of kids that you're going to spend some time initially on vocabulary. We have 2 students that we need more information on, so we don't know where they're going to fit yet. And then we have a student that we've got some arugas about that we need to find some more information on because his reading level is really low, and we're not really sure what interventions are in place for him or have been in place for him in the past. So you'll do some sleuthing around for that. But so if you're tied up for those 60 minutes with a student that you're committed to, can you see any other structure in your building where someone can take, or you could take, your group of kids to work specifically on the skills that you've recognized by digging into your data?
So the best option that we've talked about before would be during our GL block, maybe separating open GL, open study, in my class specifically, to dedicated literacy time for a group of students. Maybe you can cherry pick those students out and to have the mandatory during that flex block.
So that could be a time where this particular group of students come to you,
and then
3 out of the 5 GL blocks.
Right, and then it would be more than doubling my time of literacy intervention that I could have in the school.
So when we think about the time that those kids need to fill in the gaps and get rid of the lags that they have in skill, that's one thing to consider. How often will we see them, and how long will we see them for before we decide to see if our interventions are working? So you have 60 minutes. You could, in that GL block, maybe not the time that you're dedicated to that one student with, that's a literacy, in a level 4 literacy block. You could divide that time in half and work 30 minutes with this particular group and 30 minutes with this particular group. You know, start with a lesson around the skill that you're developing, some practice time, how to use it with content from a different discipline, and then off they go and you have another group come in, right? And then are there other people in your building that could help kind of work with students that have some capacity?
So then, Miss Jepson for sure, because we've been working together for so long on this, and I would say she knows as much as I do with a lot of this, then she would be an excellent other teacher that would be suitable for this. And then other than that, you know, just every other teacher in the school, I guess, you know, if they could, if they're practicing these activities anyways, right? But then they might have dedicated math time and stuff like that, so it would be talking with them to see how much time that they can afford throughout the week.
The nice thing, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit, that right now we're just looking at your grade 9 class. Of course, you guys have 9 to 12. So we could do multi-graded groupings where you have 9s and 10s come together in a particular group because they all lag in the same skill, right? And that cycle of intervention depends on how fast they respond or how slowly they respond to intervention as to whether you, like, I think remembering not to keep kids in a group because they're in that group and that's where they stay, but if they're picking up the skill and you can push it back into class so that they're using the skill, you can move them into another group where there's another lagging skill, because most of those kids on your list had 2 or 3 areas of concern, right? Fluency being one of them, that practice reading for a better rate of reading. So you guys kind of take care of that when you're doing your GL blocks, right? And a way to monitor that in the GL blocks when everybody's having reading time is to saddle up whoever's in that class, saddle up beside them, listen to them read for 5 minutes, pull out your literate discussion sheet, ask a few questions about what they're reading, and then we're all involved in the process of listening to kids read as often as possible, so that we're responsive to their needs. Right?
And that's what we did last year. Yeah, that's when you had each teacher monitoring, and then that's when you can see if the progress is actually happening between students. And then specifically with one student I'm working with, once a month I would be reevaluating, retesting.
With a level A?
Correct.
Right.
And then seeing if what I'm doing is showing progress with that student.
In terms of resources, because now we have some groupings and we need to develop some lessons to teach them. You had mentioned that when you guys developed your lesson, you used the reading framework.
Reading framework, so the pre, during, and post activities were a good area, good space, a good resource to use to structure activities. They're not exactly lesson plans or anything like that, but you team that with the literate discussion questions and then other resources that we've been given. Then you can dig a lot out of there, as well as in Destiny, where there is a lot of information on grade level and content specific literature.
Yeah, audio, right, all those kind of things. The other thing to keep in mind too, when you have those skilled groupings, is that connection between reading and writing, because you noticed when we were doing the mining of your data that you said lots of the same students are struggling with writing. So as we're working on those vocabulary skills in this particular group, can we embed some writing activities that help develop some of the writing skills, right? Because they strengthen each other, right? Finally, I think the other piece of it is, how are you going to track the work that you've been doing and share it with who, like with classroom teachers, with parents, with your admin, right? How do we do that? So there's a myriad of ways. I think it depends on your school and how you do it, but certainly a simple tracking sheet that you kind of, this is what we worked on today, here's how we did, next steps, because especially if there's 2 of you working with the same group of kids, how do you communicate effectively back and forth? Can you do, you mentioned that your school uses like an Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
So maybe there's a mechanism within that you can do some tracking, but that's an important part of the planning and the intervention, is tracking what we're doing, so that when we go to reassess, we can say, why is it working or why isn't it working? We tried this, it's not working, we've got to try something else. This is super effective. Let's try that same approach with another skill and see if it works for that same student, right? So there's opportunities to build in that communication piece that is really important in pushing it into the learning environment where kids are supposed to use those skills.